Police dogs, we don't normally go through the training protocol that you sport people do when it comes to bite work.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, off the top of your head, can you throw out some tips on like Chewy bites?
Yeah, so you hit on something that's one of the trickiest things. So to me, how a dog uses its mouth, one of the things is it's highly genetic is part of it, right? So, and when you get older dogs, then we don't know how much of that is genetic behavior and how much of it is a result of stress and conflict in the training, right? And so we have to kind of get to know a dog and figure out what we think is causing this, right? And sometimes that's hard if we didn't see foundation training and we don't know anything about the genetics of the dog and that kind of thing. But if you had a dog that was biting really well and now it's not, right, changes in those grips, then that might help us identify the things that are triggering that. And some of the things aside from genetics, right? So there, in the past, we used to think that, full calm bites, everybody likes bite, dogs that dig in and use their whole mouth and they're quiet on the bite and they're all that stuff. This is sort of the gold standard in protections world. And we have a tendency to look down at dogs that don't have that kind of bite, but there's some very, very confident, very strong dogs that just bite a certain way genetically. They're thrashers, shakers, chompers naturally, and nothing you're gonna do is ever gonna change that, but their confidence is awesome. They search great, they hunt great, all that's lovely. So, but if we determine that it's coming from something else, then we try to alleviate it. So if it's conflict, which it is a lot in police work sometimes, because there's conflict from in front of the dog, they're fighting somebody, the handlers are sometimes less than subtle about how they're adding control, the dog may not have had a really good pre-training, so you're yelling, yanking, cranking, shocking stuff, and that stress and stuff makes the dogs hectic. And if you could find a way to communicate more clearly or potentially clear up some of those problems, reduce the stress, calm the dog down. In decoy work, I would say almost always, again, you guys are frequently relying also on decoys that are not trained as decoys. You're just taking another officer and strapping a suit on him and he's going, yeah, right? Because that's what there's a whole, it's hard to do. It takes a long time to learn how to decoy well and how to move properly and all that kind of stuff. And so it's not something, but you guys got to help each other get your dogs trained, and nobody has access to the kind of decoys they would want all the time. And so it's really tough. And so one of the things I could say is if you can get some of the guys that are doing bite work to get a little bit of education, sometimes some of the sport trainers around and things, people that are good at suit work and things can help show them some tips on how to move and how to control their energy and moderate their energies. And then just have them calm down a little bit in the work sometimes so that you can calm down and get the control with less conflict. And sometimes that'll address the problems. And then a good decoy can sometimes move in certain ways that can encourage a dog to bite a certain way. That doesn't mean that dog's going to bite that way under stress, but in day-to-day sessions, if I'm a good enough decoy, I can manipulate how a dog's biting in a certain situation to some degree based on how I'm moving. But that won't really help you at the end of the day. When your dog goes out and thinks he's in a real fight, he's going to bite the way he naturally bites under stress. And so it's a kind of a complicated question, unfortunately. But one of the things is I would try to get the guys that are working the dogs, you and other people that are potentially suiting up for dogs, to try to get some decoy education from people that are good at that, learning to move and learning to relax and learning to give better feedback to the dogs as a training. It's like no matter what you're doing, if you're a soldier, if you're a police officer and stuff like that, you don't actually train for your job by going out and having real shootouts and real fights, right? You practice certain skills that are applicable, and it's a game. You're practicing skills. You practice shooting at a range. You have targets. You do things like that, and you try to make it look like certain things, but you're not in an all-out fight all the time, right? The dogs, we don't always give them that luxury, and it should be the same for the dogs. So for the dogs, most of the time, it's like doing martial arts. We're working on the skills. Like if I'm a tennis player, I don't practice tennis by playing tennis matches. I go out and hit 500 backhands and 500 forehands, and I practice my serve toss, and I practice my footwork and all that stuff, right? Same with biting dogs. So most of your practice reps should be just good fundamental reps. Your dog shouldn't think they're in a street fight. I don't have to act all the time like a real person getting bit's gonna act. Sometimes I do. I'm going to have to make certain practices where I'm screaming and flopping and all that kind of stuff too. So my dog's used to that, but not every time. And lots of my reps should be basic fundamentals. This is where you bite, this is how you bite, this is how you let go. Good. Rewarding the dog for coming back properly, or outing or guarding properly, or all those basic things. And we run a lot of just practice on fundamental reps. And then we put together more realistic scenarios. And my experience with a lot of officers is they're trying to behave a little bit like, too much like the street all the time. So there's a balance between that, especially in bite work, because my dog can't be in that state all the time and think clearly. And so it inhibits some of the teaching and skills. And so calming things down a little bit while you work on that might change things as well.
What's your opinion on like putting them on a bungee line to make them bite down harder?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, back pressure and things like that can be really useful. Bungees are, depending on the way it's set up, are really good for lower body biters. You have to be more careful when they're upper body biters, right? Because obviously on a bungee, if the dog leaves the ground at the wrong time, they can get whipped over backwards and they can have just have to be careful the dog doesn't have a bad experience with them. But yeah, long lines, back pressure, bungees, those things all can help what we call the initial strike and initial grip. Yeah, absolutely. Also, backing off on some of the intensity of the control while you're teaching some of those things. So make sure that I go up and take my dog off or remove my dog from somebody that's a little more passive, that's not fighting him as hard, so I don't have to put as much pressure on him. Some of the lack of intensity in the biting can be conflict with the handler, thinking too much about getting corrected and things, so they're uncommitted and they're making their choices, but they're like, you're in the back of their head the whole time instead of, so part of that can be a part of the training relationship too. So we could talk about this for months. It's an awesome topic. It's near and dear to my heart. It's fascinating stuff, but it's very complicated. And so we have so many things to try to keep track of. Bungees, back pressure, I would say getting better decoy work, calming your decoys down, eliminating some of the conflict from your handling and things like that are useful in helping to fix gripping behavior.
How do you know? What are some signs that tell you that it's genetic?
It's not changing. Everything else about the dog says they're comfortable and confident. They're not having any problems. The relationship with the handler's good. They're listening well. There's not a lot of fighting stuff there, and they're still biting that way. It's probably genetic. You guys also keep a lot of Dutch dogs, right? So a lot of the police departments get dogs from Dutch bloodlines, Holland, because they make good police dogs. There's no doubt. There's an organization in Holland, the KNPV, and they're geared towards trying to raise dogs that will eventually be police dogs. And so the whole country is sort of committed to this sport, which is really like a pre-selection for police dogs. They test all the skills that are necessary for good police dogs, good searching, environmental soundness, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of not all of them by any stretch, I'm making a generalization, but a lot of the Dutch dogs, they don't care as much about the quality of the bite in terms of full and calm. They care about the dog's commitment, energy, searching, hardness, ability to handle stress. And so some of those bloodlines are natural thrashers and munchers. You see that in certain Dutch bloodlines more frequently than you would say in a Belgian bloodline or in a German Shepherd who's been selected for calm gripping for generations. Because they will take a dog that doesn't have calm grips, but the dog's got everything else to be a good police dog, and they say, that's a good police dog. He doesn't have to grip calmly to be a good police dog. And so you see that more frequently in those bloodlines genetically than you do in certain other ones. Not all of them though. There's some Dutch dogs that have awesome, full, calm, great grips, but you see it crop up in certain bloodlines, and frequently you guys don't know what the bloodlines are either. No, I'm not saying you guys don't, but lots of them don't. They've come through brokers or whatever, and they were unregistered dogs to begin with, and so who knows what's in their background, which doesn't help us, right? So if I grab a dog from bloodline X and I know his parents and grandparents, then I go, oh yeah, they all bite like that. Or, that's not normal for this bloodline, so maybe we're stressing them out too much, right? But if you don't have that information, then the genetic call without having seen the dog when they're young is really a tough one.